Okay, finding volume part 4 is tricky only really for one reason, and that is when students look at a diagram like this and they see 64 on the bottom, they don't know what the 64 means. And so what the 64 means here is that the base of this prism has an area of 64. So if I were to change this perspective here and draw this outside of it, if I had an area that had 64 units in it, well, that would have to be, well, one way it could be, I suppose, I should say, not have to be. If I had an 8 by 8 grid here like this, that would be, whoops, not real good there, that would be 60, if I could draw it right, that would be 64 if it were 8 by 8. 8 rows of 8 would make 64 squares. And so what they're asking you to imagine here is that this base is 8 by 8 units. 8 units by 8 units. So if those two are there, you could write them down in this formula, and 6 times 8 times 8 is the height times the base equals the volume, and that's the formula for a simple rectangular prism. The volume is equal to the base times the height, and students then would need to calculate that. Of course, it's not the only thing that makes 64. You could argue that this is 2 by 32, and that makes 64, but it doesn't really look realistic that way because it doesn't look like it's so skinny to be 2 back there. So any two factors that would make 64 could work as these two dimensions. But usually when students are looking at these, the dimensions are probably ones that are pretty common, like 48. Probably most students think of 6 times 8 being the first two things that multiply to make 48. And 36, that has a lot, of course. They could say 4 by 9. They could say 3 by 12. They could say 6 by 6. It doesn't really matter. They could use any of those. 3 by 12, 4 by 9. There's all sorts of dimensions there. Factor pairs, excuse me. Well, they're dimensions also, but they're also factor pairs from what we learned in the fall that produce that area of the base. And that's really how the most difficult part of this last one works. All of these numbers, they just need to find two factors that produce and then multiply it times the height. And that's all for finding volume on this worksheet.